Now Seattle looking for a new head coach and kind of maybe sparking a more big change moving forward for the Seahawks franchise. Joining us now to talk about it all is a man who covers the Seattle Seahawks for ESPN, Brady Henderson, joining us. Brady, thanks for taking a few minutes for us, man. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing great, especially after you brought me in with Screaming Trees, one of my favorite bands. I don't know if you did that just because I'm a Seattle guy, but either way, I appreciate it. So
luck of the draw.
Yeah, it was pure luck, but you know what? I'm glad when the rotator hits for our guests. This was, I think the day was a surprise and when it just kind of came out of nowhere, but this is a move that people had kind of had their eye on for a while, especially, when you saw Pete Carroll maybe taking another minute to go out on the field and kind of look at things after that game against Philadelphia. How surprised were you at the timing of when Pete Carroll and the Seahawks decided to announce their split?
Somewhat, but at the same time, not really. I thought that once it got past Monday, which is, typically when you see head coaches get fired, I kind of started to think he was safe, but then actually the longer it got after that, the Seahawks typically would do his postseason meeting with the media on Tuesday, and not only did they not do it Tuesday, but they had yet to set a date. And so the longer that went on, it just seemed like they were, buying time to figure things out. And it just seemed, I think, over the second half of the season, when they were in that 4-game losing streak and just the way that they were underachieving, I think, on both sides of the ball, and going towards a season that, was going to be a 9 or at best 10-win season, it just seemed like there was a question in my mind as to what ownership would think about this team and just the direction. And, I think a lot of NFL franchises would trade places with the Seahawks, but 25 and 26 over the last 3 seasons, there was really, no clear sign that this team was really ready to take a next step. And, Carroll on his radio show a day after the season finale was asked if he thinks that they are closer now than they were a year ago to a Super Bowl. And he said yes, which is what you would expect him to say. But he didn't have really a convincing case as to why he felt that way. And hearing that, it just seemed like, if he can't muster that case on his radio show, what kind of case is he going to muster to ownership when they have their end of season meetings? And, I think that, whatever reasoning he gave or whatever, outlook for the direction of the team that he gave to Jody Allen, it just seems like she wasn't convinced either.
They said, and Pete said that the split was amicable, but he still wanted to coach and fought for himself to coach this team. Do you see Pete Carroll maybe making another run somewhere, potentially elsewhere?
I can see it, yeah. And look, I think the advisory role that he is ostensibly moving into with the Seahawks was really just a way for them to, give him an out and to give him kind of a graceful exit as opposed to just outright firing, the best coach in franchise history. I think they were always going to try to do this. Whenever they were going to move on from Carroll, they were going to try to do it as respectfully as possible. And I think, that's what this is. And Carroll said that, he really has no idea what that advisory role is going to entail, other than that it's not going to entail him assisting GM John Schneider in the search for his replacement. And so the fact that they haven't really seemed to talk about it at all and really get into what that will mean, and also the fact that Carroll clearly didn't want to stop being the head coach, I think that advisory role may really just be sort of nominally so, and not an actual role. And I do wonder if he's going to want to coach elsewhere. I mean, he made a couple things clear in his news conference yesterday. One was that this was not the outcome he wanted, and two was that he still feels like, even at 72 years old, that he's got the juice to coach. And so if the right opportunity comes up, I would not be surprised at all if he entertains that. I asked him if that would be the case, and he didn't shoot it down. He said, today's about today, and he said, I don't know, we'll find out. So he seems open to it, and I wonder if, maybe a team like the Chargers comes calling. He's obviously got the ties in L.A. They've that's a team that's in difficult salary cap situation, but they've got a franchise quarterback and some other big-name players. And so that would be kind of the obvious one, but I just wouldn't be surprised if he entertains the thought of coaching in, knowing that he wasn't ready to give up this coaching job.
Brady Henderson is our guest, ESPN Seahawks reporter. If you look at, all right, Jody Allen and Burt Cold, who I think a lot of Seahawks fans are now learning of Burt Cold's presence in Vulcan and in ownership with the Portland Trailblazers and the Seattle Seahawks and his roles that he has as an advisor to Jody. But what direction do you think we see the Seahawks go for their next head coach? Because a players coach, but a defensive-minded players coach in Pete Carroll. What do you believe is next for what they're looking for?
Well, I think they're going to lean on John Schneider, really, to make this decision. And obviously the owner is going to have to sign off on it. But, I don't think this is a search that's going to be led by Burt Cold or Jody Allen. I think Schneider is going to be really driving force in it. And, I don't know. I don't have any great insight on this piece of it. But, I don't know if he's going to be looking for an offensive versus a defensive coach or vice versa so much as he's going to be looking for a guy who, is a great leader of people. I think that was Carroll's greatest strength. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so much the X's and O's. I think clearly over the last few seasons, it wasn't, hiring assistant coaches, which is a huge part of the job. And I think a huge part of the reason why he's no longer in the job. But I think his greatest strength was just connecting with players and leading people. And so I think that's going to be important for John Schneider. And I think it's also going to be hugely important to get a guy who he knows personality-wise that he's going to mesh with. And Dan Quinn, if you've ever interacted with him, to me, seems like one of the more genuine, down-to-earth people that you will meet in the NFL. And Schneider is very much the same way. So I think that personality-wise, those two guys would make a great pair, probably more so than Schneider and somebody like Jim Harbaugh, excuse me. For as great of a coach as he is, and there's no doubt, just won a national championship and had a lot of success in the NFL as well. But I just don't know if that personality, that might be John Schneider. I wonder if he would view that as kind of maybe a difficult guy to work with. He's been in the NFL long enough and he's plugged in enough to know to be able to get different opinions about Harbaugh throughout the league. And so I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I just think from a personality standpoint, Dan Quinn would be a lot better match for Schneider than Harbaugh would.
Look, no matter who it is, one thing that's going to be harder is your job, because Pete Carroll was always a guy who willing to talk and give you actually a little bit of substance to kind of write about. What are your memories of the lasting memories of Pete Carroll in being one of those guys who, in a world where coaches want to shut off the outside world and shut off the media, he would give you guys nuggets that you guys could chew on every now and then?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think he and Bill Belichick are probably on the opposite ends of the coaching spectrum when it comes to dealing with, people like me and what they're willing to divulge and say. So I will miss that about Carroll. I will not miss having to transcribe a lot of his, verbose answers and sort of over the top praise. And you sort of, at times I think we all felt ourselves rolling our eyes knowing that, okay, he's making this practice squad guy sound like he's a Hall of Famer. But look, that's a trade-off for all of the good stuff that came with being able to cover Pete Carroll. And yeah, hopefully whoever, just for my sake, and not that anybody really cares about this, but hopefully for our sake as reporters, that the next guy is, as helpful as he was.
And then we'll kind of we saw Russell Wilson tweeted out a photo. A lot of former players kind of coming and meeting up yesterday. The love that his players had for him was something that is pretty rare for the NFL. As you talk to the players about Pete Carroll, present and former, kind of what is their lasting impact that Pete Carroll had on them?
Yeah, the one thing you always hear about Carroll is how he was the same guy. Like, he was so consistent, win or lose. He never really had a bad day, and you always sort of knew what you were getting from him and all the energy and the positivity and all that. And I think another really special aspect about Carroll is, he was willing to let things kind of roll off his back. And look, a lot of the guys, Russell Wilson tweeted the photo. I think it was a lot of the guys from that Super Bowl team, the Super Bowl teams got together last night. And, it wasn't, Russell was probably the most extreme example, but a lot of those guys, when they left Seattle, it didn't really end well for them relationship wise. And they took shots at Carroll on their way out. And, he was able to, take that for what it was and realize that, guys are in a, vulnerable position or whatever. And he kind of let things slide and realized that, there's a deep relationship there. And I think he coached players sort of like a father, and he treated them kind of like their children and stuff. And so, at the end of the day, your children might go astray and they might screw up and they might get mad at you, but they're still your kids and you're still going to love them. And so, I don't know anything about that myself because I'm not a father, but that's, I think that's generally how it works. And so, I think that is kind of one of his lasting, part of his legacy in Seattle is just the relationship that he had with his players. And, guys wanted to play for him. And then when they left, even if it ended poorly, I think they went other places and a lot of them realized how good they had it. And then, they were able to mend those fences ultimately.
Well, it's going to be an offseason that's busy for you. Brady you got new head coach coming in and potentially a lot of roster changes as well. Thank you for taking a few minutes for us, man. I always appreciate your time.
Yeah, for sure. You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.
There he is, Brady Henderson, ESPN. Go give him a follow if you don't already, at Brady Henderson on Twitter. Does a great job covering the Seattle Seahawks. And look, man, this is Pete Carroll leaving Seattle. That void that you have from the culture standpoint, and we talked about this a lot yesterday, in that the culture that he built, it was different than most NFL teams. In that Brady hit on that there. It was more like a father figure in the NFL, where you see a lot of other coaches around the league. It is because players get paid oftentimes more than the coach does.
Yeah.
It is almost a peer-to-peer relationship. Pete Carroll did have that more nurturing collegiate father type figure, and it worked in the NFL, which is so rare.
Well, and he was rare also in that he's kind of he's a big rah-rah guy, and you don't see that much in the NFL. He has, like you said, he had a very collegiate feel with it, and I think his players fed off of that. And yeah, it did create a different kind of relationship between player and coach than you typically see in the league.
All right. Well, where do the Seahawks go from here? Dan Quinn seems to be the guy that people are all circling, Cowboys defensive coordinator.
I think it's pretty much even money on him right now.
Yeah, and then you go into like the Mike Vrabels, who also just got the axe from the Tennessee Titans, who kind of fit that mold. And it'll be very interesting to see kind of the John Schneider effect in all this. And